There comes a moment in everyone's life when they stand in front of the mirror and realize, perhaps for the first time with absolute clarity, that the years have passed, and they remain trapped in the same patterns, the same frustrations, the same empty promises they make to themselves every Monday morning. What if I told you that Stephen Covey, one of the greatest thinkers on human development who ever lived, discovered that the problem was never a lack of willpower, a lack of discipline, or a lack of luck? The problem has always been in the way you see yourself, in the distorted mental map you carry without even realizing it exists. Covey used to say that we don't see the world as it is, but as we... And that single phrase, when truly understood, has the power to shatter invisible chains that have bound you for decades. Think about it for a moment. How many times have you woken up determined to change, feeling that inner flame burning, only to see it go out before noon? How many times have you wondered why some people seem to move forward with ease while you struggle against invisible currents every day? The answer isn't in superficial, cheap motivational techniques, in those mechanically repeated mantras that evaporate at the first. Stephen Covey taught us that true transformation happens from the inside out, through a radical paradigm shift, not just positive thinking as an empty exercise, but rebuilding the deep foundations of your identity, reprogramming the lens through which you interpret absolutely everything that happens in your life. What you are about to hear in the next few minutes is not just another disposable motivational video. It's an immersion in the timeless principles that Covey dedicated more than 40 years of his life to researching, testing, and refining. Principles that transformed failed executives into visionary leaders, broken marriages into deep unions, and people on the verge of emotional collapse into centered, serene, and extraordinarily effective human beings. He discovered that genuine positive thinking isn't about pretending problems don't exist. It's not about putting on a fake smile while your life crumbles. It's about developing what he called true proactivity, the ability to consciously choose your response to any circumstance, no matter how devastating it may seem. Perhaps you are watching this video during a silent crisis, one that no one around you notices. Perhaps you feel you've lost control of your own narrative, that you're just reacting to life instead of creating it. Covey understood this pain deeply, and that's exactly why he dedicated his life to showing that between stimulus and response, there is a sacred space, and in that space lies your freedom, your capacity for growth, your possibility of completely rewriting the script of your story. The positive thinking he taught isn't naive optimism. It's a mental architecture based on universal principles that work regardless of whether you believe in them or not, just as gravity works whether you accept it or deny it. So I ask you, don't leave this video. Don't let the algorithm drag you to the next empty distraction. What comes next may be exactly the bridge you've been searching for years between who you are today and who you know, deep down in your soul, you were born to become. Stephen Covey left a legacy that transcends generations, and today you have the rare opportunity to absorb the distilled essence of his most transformative teachings on how to reprogram your mind, align your thoughts with your deepest values, and finally, begin to live the life you always knew you deserved. Take a deep breath. We're just getting started. Imagine you've been given a map to navigate an unfamiliar city. You follow every instruction precisely, turn left where the map indicates, walk 300 meters when it commands, but simply don't reach your destination. Frustrated, you blame your legs, your speed, your determination, until someone approaches and reveals a devastating truth. The map you're carrying isn't for that city. Stephen Covey used this powerful metaphor to illustrate something most people spend their entire lives without understanding. No matter how positive you try to be, no matter how many affirmations you repeat in the mirror every morning, if your internal map is wrong, you will remain lost. Genuine positive thinking doesn't begin with motivational phrases. It begins with the brutal courage to question whether the reality you see is, in fact, reality. Covey called these internal maps paradigms, and he dedicated decades to demonstrating that they are infinitely more powerful than any superficial self-help technique. A paradigm is the invisible lens through which you interpret absolutely everything: your relationships, your work, your value as a human being, your future possibilities. And here is the disturbing secret that few are willing to face. You didn't consciously choose most of your paradigms. They were installed in you during childhood, absorbed from the family environment, shaped by teachers, influenced by traumas you may not even remember anymore. You are living life through glasses that someone else put on your face, and you never stop to ask if the prescription is correct. Think about the beliefs that silently govern your daily decisions. Perhaps you carry the conviction that people like you can't get rich, or that relationships always end in disappointment, or that showing vulnerability is a sign of weakness. These are not universal truths. They are paradigms, inherited interpretations that you have confused with reality itself. Stephen Covey taught us that the deepest and most lasting change doesn't happen when we try to modify our behaviors on the surface, but when we have the courage to descend into the depths and transform the paradigms that generate those behaviors. It's like trying to change the reflection in the mirror without changing the person in front of it, a futile exercise that consumes energy without producing results. The first revolution of true positive thinking, therefore, is not repeating that everything will be all right while your subconscious mind screams the opposite. It's achieving what Covey called a paradigm shift, that seismic moment when you realize you are seeing everything from a limited perspective and suddenly a new dimension is revealed. Remember those images that can be seen in two different ways, where one moment you see a young woman and the next an elderly lady. The image doesn't change, but your perception of it is completely transformed. That's exactly what happens when you genuinely question your paradigms. The world remains the same, but you become able to see possibilities that were previously literally invisible to you. There's a story Stephen Covey repeatedly told in his lectures, and it has the power to change how you respond to every difficult situation for the rest of your life. He was on a New York subway one Sunday morning, the car quiet and peaceful, when a man entered with his children. The children immediately began to scream, run, and disturb other passengers, and the father simply sat there, eyes closed, completely indifferent to the chaos. Covey felt irritation growing inside him, judged the man as irresponsible until he couldn't take it anymore, and confronted him. "Your children are disturbing everyone. Couldn't you do something?" The man looked up as if waking from a trance and replied in a broken voice, "You're right, I should do something. Hey, it's just that we just left the hospital where their mother died an hour ago, and I don't think any of us know how to deal with this." In a single instant, Covey's entire reality transformed. The irritation evaporated, replaced by profound compassion. The same behavior from the children, the same seemingly negligent father, but now seen through a completely different paradigm. He realized at that moment something that would forever change his understanding of positive thinking. It is not the circumstances that determine how we feel. It is the interpretation we make of them. What if we could consciously choose our interpretations? What if, in the face of any adversity, we could pause before reacting and ask ourselves, is there another way of seeing this that I haven't considered yet? Covey discovered that between each stimulus we receive and the response we give there is a space, and in that space lies the most extraordinary power a human being can develop. He called this true proactivity and insisted that this is the fundamental difference between people who are eternal victims of circumstances and people who become architects of their own destiny. Most people live in what he called reactive mode. Something happens, they react automatically like machines programmed by past experiences. Someone criticizes them and they defend themselves aggressively. The traffic is slow and they explode with anger. The partner makes a mistake and they hold a grudge for weeks. There is no choice, no freedom, just a mechanical sequence of cause and effect. The positive thinking that transforms lives is not about ignoring problems or pretending that everything is fine when it clearly isn't. It's about developing the ability to inhabit that sacred space between stimulus and response, to refuse the automatism of conditioned reactions, to consciously ask oneself, how do I choose to interpret this? What response honors who I truly want to be? Viktor Frankl, a prisoner in Nazi concentration camps, discovered this same truth in the most extreme circumstances imaginable, and Covey often quoted his words, "They can take everything from a man except the last of human freedoms, the freedom to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. If a man managed to maintain this freedom in Auschwitz, what prevents us from exercising it in traffic, at work, in everyday conflicts?" Stephen Covey used to conduct a disturbing thought experiment with his audiences. He would ask them to imagine being at their own funeral 3 years in the future. 4 people would stand up to speak: a family member, a friend, a co-worker, and someone from a community or organization to which you belonged. The question he posed pierced the surface and reached the depths. What would you want each of these people to say about you? What kind of spouse, parent, friend, professional would you want their words to reveal? What contributions, what accomplishments, what difference would you have liked to have made? And then came the devastating question: is the life you are living today, the choices you are making at this very moment, leading you in the direction of those words, or in the opposite direction? This is the second habit of highly effective people that Covey identified after decades of research, beginning with the end in mind. And it is here that positive thinking completely transcends the superficiality of empty affirmations and becomes a genuinely transformative force. Thinking positively without a clear vision of your destination is like rowing enthusiastically in a boat without a rudder. You may be expending enormous energy to move further and further away from where you really want to go. Covey discovered that the most fulfilled and happy people are not necessarily the most optimistic in the naive sense of the word, but those who have developed a crystal-clear clarity about who they want to become and align every thought, every decision, every action with that greater vision. He taught that there are 2 creations for absolutely everything that exists in the world. The first creation is mental. It is the project, the vision, the blueprint. The second creation is physical. It is the concrete manifestation of what was first imagined. A house exists first in the architect's mind before it exists in bricks and cement. A business exists first as an idea before it exists as a company. And here is the crucial revelation. Your life is also being created twice, whether you are aware of it or not. The question is, who is doing the first creation? Are you consciously designing the person you want to become, or are you outsourcing that creation to the environment, to the expectations of others, to the scripts that society imposes on you? Authentic positive thinking in Covey's philosophy is about taking full responsibility for the first creation of your life. It's about sitting in silence and writing what he called a personal mission statement, a living document that articulates your deepest values, your most important roles, and the unique contribution you want to leave in the world. This isn't about generic optimism, about believing that the universe will conspire in your favor while you passively watch. It's about intentionally creating the mental architecture upon which every decision will be built, so that when inevitable challenges arise, and they will, you have an internal compass that consistently points to the true north of your existence. Here's a truth the self-help industry rarely admits because it doesn't sell books or fill auditoriums. You can't pretend to be someone you're not for very... Stephen Covey observed over decades working with leaders, executives, families, and individuals that the attempt to project a positive image externally without building genuine character internally always, without exception, collapses. He called this The personality ethic approach, this modern obsession with public image techniques, calculated body language, and manufactured likability. And he contrasted it with something infinitely deeper, the character ethic, which understands that true growth happens from the inside out, not from the outside in. Covey taught that before seeking public victories, professional success, extraordinary relationships, positive influence over others, you need to achieve private victories. And what exactly are these private victories? They are the silent battles that no one sees. It's keeping the promise you made to yourself when no human eye is watching. It's getting up at 5 in the morning to work on your project when your bed begs you to stay. It's keeping your cool when your temper wants to explode. It's about genuinely forgiving when pride insists on resentment. Every time you win one of these invisible battles, something extraordinary happens. You deposit a credit of self-confidence into your emotional bank account that no positive affirmation can buy. The reason so many people repeat motivational phrases without experiencing real change is precisely this. They are trying to build a building starting from the roof. They declare to the mirror that they are confident while knowing that yesterday they broke yet another promise to themselves. They claim they deserve success while consciously choosing comfort over discipline. The dissonance between what they say and what they do creates an internal fracture that no positive thinking technique can repair. Covey was relentless on this point. Genuine self-confidence doesn't come from verbally convincing yourself of your worth. It comes from repeatedly proving to yourself, through consistent actions, that you are a person of integrity, that your word has weight, that you can trust yourself. That's why transformative positive thinking begins with small commitments fulfilled. It begins with seemingly insignificant decisions honored. Covey suggested that if you can't trust yourself to keep a small promise, like waking up at a specific time or meditating for 10 minutes, how can you trust yourself for the big challenges that will inevitably come? The correct sequence is, make small promises to yourself and keep them. Then make gradually larger promises and keep those too. Each fulfillment adds another credit to your personal integrity account, until one day you realize you've become someone you genuinely trust. And that's the indestructible foundation upon which all true positive thinking can ultimately be built. Stephen Covey told the story of a lumberjack who encounters another lumberjack in the forest, sawing trees with desperate fury, sweating exhaustively, but producing less and less. He asks, "How long have you been at this pace?" The man replies, without stopping sawing, 5 hours, and I don't have time to rest. I need to cut down these trees." The first lumberjack observes the completely dull blade and asks, "Why don't you stop for a few minutes to sharpen your saw? It would be much more efficient." The answer is tragic and familiar. "I don't have time to sharpen, I'm too busy sawing." Covey used this parable to illustrate the seventh habit that he considered the most important of all: renewal, or as he poetically named it, sharpening the saw. Authentic positive thinking is not a state that you automatically achieve and maintain forever. It is an ongoing practice that requires constant renewal in the 4 fundamental dimensions of the human being. Covey identified these dimensions as physical, mental, emotional, social, and spiritual, and insisted that neglecting any one of them compromises all the others. You can have the most powerful paradigms, the clearest vision, the most solid integrity, but if your body is exhausted, your mind stagnant, your relationships impoverished, or your soul disconnected from greater meaning, your saw is becoming dull. And a dull saw working with double, the force produces less than a sharp saw operating with half the effort. The physical dimension requires exercise, proper nutrition, rest, not as a luxury, but as the foundation for any other achievement. The mental dimension requires continuous learning, reading, exposure to ideas that challenge your current paradigms. The emotional social dimension demands genuine investment in meaningful relationships, contribution to others, connections that nurture your humanity. And the spiritual dimension, perhaps the most neglected in modern life, needs moments of silence, reflection on purpose, contact with values that transcend the immediate and the material. Covey saw these four dimensions as the blades of a saw, and stated that the time invested in sharpening them is never time wasted. It is time multiplied. Here's the paradox that superficial positive thinking can never solve. The busier you are, the more you need to stop and sharpen your saw. The more stressed you are, the more you need renewal. The more urgent external demands seem, the more vital inner work becomes. Stephen Covey lived this philosophy until his last days, waking up at dawn to run, meditate, study sacred texts, and prepare his mind for the day. He understood that genuine positive thinking is not a technique you apply in times of crisis. It's a garden you cultivate daily through the 4 seasons of your existence, so that when the inevitable storms arrive, you have roots deep enough not to be uprooted. We've reached the end of this journey, but something tells me it's only just beginning within you. Over these past few minutes, we've walked together through territories that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. Those silent spaces where the truth about who we are and who we choose to become resides. Stephen Covey dedicated more than 4 decades of his life to illuminating these inner paths, not because it was easy, but because he knew that all genuine transformation is born there, in the depths we prefer to ignore. You've heard about the distorted maps we carry without realizing it, about the sacred space between what happens to us and how we respond, about the invisible architecture that precedes all visible construction. But hearing is not the same as awakening, and knowing is not the same as living. The question that now hangs in the silence between us is devastatingly simple. What will you do with all of this tomorrow morning? When the alarm clock rings and the familiar routine tries to drag you back onto the same old tracks, will you remember that you have the power to choose? When someone frustrates you and your temperament demands the usual automatic reaction, will you inhabit that space between stimulus and response, or will you surrender your freedom again? Covey never promised it would be easy. He promised it would be real. He promised that the principles work, whether you believe in them or not, just as the law of the harvest works for the farmer who plants and for the one who ignores the seasons. Life responds to what you genuinely cultivate, not to what you merely wish for. There is an image that has stayed with me since I truly understood Covey's philosophy, and I want to leave it with you as a parting gift. Imagine that your mind is a garden. For years, perhaps decades, seeds have been planted there without your permission. Seeds of fear, of doubt, of limiting paradigms that well-meaning people or cruel circumstances have deposited in your inner soil. Some of these seeds have grown into enormous trees, with roots so deep that you mistake them for part of the land itself. Superficial positive thinking attempts to prune the branches of these trees, trim the leaves, disguise their appearance. But Covey taught us to go to the roots. He taught us that we are the gardeners, not the plants, that we can, with patience and persistence, uproot what doesn't belong there and deliberately cultivate what we want to see flourish. A year from now, you may be exactly where you are now, or you may be living a reality that seems impossible today. The distance between these two futures is not measured in luck, talent, or favorable circumstances. It is measured in microscopic choices made daily, in promises kept when no one is looking, in paradigms questioned when it would be more comfortable to accept them, in moments of renewal stolen from an agenda that screams, "There is no time." Stephen Covey left us a real map to a real city, the city of true effectiveness, where external success and inner peace are not enemies but allies. The only question that remains is whether you will have the courage to follow it. I could end by asking you to subscribe to this channel, leave a comment, and share this video. But I prefer to do it differently. I prefer to ask you to do this only if something inside me touched something inside you. If some phrase pierced the surface and reached a place you haven't visited in a long time, if you felt, even for a fleeting moment, that there's a version of you waiting to be born, a freer, more intentional version, more aligned with who you truly are in your deepest layers. If that happened, then subscribing, commenting on what resonated with you, and sending this video to someone who needs to hear this message won't be a favor you're doing me. It will be a silent pact between us that the transformation has begun. Stephen Covey ended his lectures with a truth that has never left me. To live is to choose, and to choose is to renounce what we don't choose. From now on, every thought you nurture, every reaction you allow, every promise you make or break to yourself will be a choice. The question that will stay with you when this video ends, and perhaps with you for the rest of your life, is simply this: are you consciously choosing, or are you simply being lived?